Hello and welcome to There's No Business Like, a podcast where friends and industry colleagues explore topics and interview leaders in our industry of professional theatrical touring.
Hey everybody, welcome back to There's No Business Like. I'm Brian Zellmer at KU Presents in Kutztown University, and I'm here with my friends, Katie.
Hi everyone, Katie Miller with Michigan Maven Creative Associates in Midland, Michigan.
Josh
Benson in Marion, Illinois at the Marion Cultural and Civic Center.
Kevin
Maynard, Quad City Arts, splitting the border between Iowa and Illinois.
And Danielle.
Hey, it's Danielle Van Hook from the Alden in McLean, Virginia.
So this week we're bringing you part 2 of our Max topical episodes. Our topic this week is the cost of touring. We're speaking with 3 self-repped artists and 2 presenters that we sat down with at the Midwest Arts Expo just a couple weeks ago. Before we get into that, I just want to mention these recordings were done in our booth in the expo hall. Can you guys just talk about that experience a little bit, since I wasn't there and Bri Baca had to fill my place?
So we had this amazing feature within the booth. We had Bri Baca.
Local celebrity.
Yes, it was a big rectangle, and it had a microphone in it and a camera.
Only one microphone, Kevin?
And I was there. I was there too.
No, it was actually a square.
Okay. You know what?
Granted, all squares are rectangles, but
See, I was just testing your geometry.
But also the first time a couple of us walked into the expo hall, there was a group of agents that were standing there at the front, and they looked at us and they were like, you can't be in here, because they knew we were presenters. So honestly, still weird to exist on that side of the aisle.
oddly, I didn't get that.
You know, I think that the weirder part was, carrying in Bri Baca. that might have been the first thing that got set up in our booth.
Yeah. So we explained last week how Bri Baca was my face on a Chewbacca standee, but you mentioned agents, and I saw some pictures of some agents just holding my face against theirs. So how many faces of Brian Zellmer did you guys have at this?
27.
4.
There were 4, Brian. I will say about being in the expo hall, like we did this last year, we did it again this year. There are some people who are totally gung-ho to come talk to us and come find us and are excited to sit down and chat. And some other people who walk by hesitantly and they're sort of looking at you like they're really interested. And those are the people that are actually most fun to talk to when you sort of pull them in and say, hey, do you want to have a conversation? Because they're thinking about it, but they're nervous to do it live. And it always turns out great. And we always have a great conversation. So if we are back at Max next year and in the expo hall and you're thinking about it and you want to join us, please do. Please just jump on the mic with us, sit down, have a chat. We love meeting new people, and it always turns out to be a ton of fun.
On that note, we're going to get to the conversations that you guys had, and we'll talk to you all on the other side.
My name is Helen Welch. I'm an artist. I self-represent and have an agent. I am in Ohio based, and I tour all over the United States.
And what is your show?
I have several productions. So my main show is Superstar, The Songs, The Stories, The Carpenters, which is a musical portrait of the Carpenters, not a tribute. I do First Ladies of Song. I do Come Together, The Beatles Reimagined. And then I also work with symphony orchestras with my own programs.
Excellent.
That
Love
keeps
it.
me out of mischief.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Helen.
Thank you.
Okay. So as an artist, we're going to talk about the cost of touring.
Yeah.
So what do you think is the riskiest part of touring in the United States today?
For me, it's flights. The flights have gone up really, really. The cost has gone up exorbitantly since COVID, and trying to plan the cost of a tour, not really knowing what the flights are going to cost, is a nightmare.
It's bananas. Yeah.
Very difficult.
So with that, what do you wish others in the industry knew about the way your touring financials have changed since the pandemic?
Well, the budgets from the theaters haven't gone up as much.
Yes.
So, and I can't pay my musicians less. In
Right.
fact, I've had to pay them more since COVID. And so it cuts into my bottom line. And that's very difficult.
Yeah, we're in a little bit of a catch-22 situation with that. So what do you think is the most cost-effective way of touring then in the U.S.? No, with those things.
Yeah, I mean, it's always more attractive if the date is drivable. And if you're 17 and you want to be on a tour bus, be my guest. I've moved on from that. So, drivable is always more pleasant. Flying is horrible. It's unpleasant and unreliable. And of course, we've got the anxiety of making sure we get there and we get there at the right time on the right day, So driving is more attractive, but also very wearing on everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you can connect those dates, do the routings, it becomes more cost effective.
Yes.
Do you do merch with your shows?
Yes, I do. Okay.
So do you think merch splits are becoming an antiquated practice in the U.S.? Or how do you feel about merch splits?
I'm okay giving a percentage from my merch if the presenter is making an effort to sell the merch. And often there'll be a volunteer. And if I'm in a smaller venue, I'm really happy to give them something because we're using their venue to sell merch. If I can get away with taking 100%, I do. And at the moment, bearing in mind what we just talked about with all the costs going up and their budgets not going up, then it's obviously a very negotiable thing, part of the contract.
Excellent. Well, thank you for sitting down with me.
Thank
It's
you.
so nice to meet you.
You too. I like the podcast.
My name is Patrick Donelly. I work for the Kauffman Center for the Performing Arts in Kansas City, Missouri.
Welcome, Patrick. Let's talk about cost of touring. What do you think is the riskiest part of touring in the U.S. today?
Audience interest in touring artists.
Say more.
You know what audiences have done historically, but the future is a bit unknown and undetermined. Someone that has played well for you in the past, a poor date choice may affect how they do on your next engagement with them. There are plenty of variables that are harder to control. Goodness knows we've seen a great deal of audience behavior change in the last 5 years, and I think that ripples through how they respond to on sales, certainly the timing of their purchases, and sometimes the eventual numbers you settle on.
Okay, so what do you wish others in the industry knew about the way your venue or presenting financials have changed in the last 4 years?
We're on the not-for-profit side of the sector, so there's always been a contributed income component to it. I would say we are more mindful of needing to use that regularly than we have been historically. There's a good activity blend of resident companies, our own presentations, and just outright rentals at the Kauffman Center. But I would say the need for contributed support has evolved in the last 5 years, if only because audiences are behaving differently and touring costs have done anything but decrease.
What do you think is the most cost-effective way of touring in the U.S. today?
Well, everybody routes by ground, or almost everybody routes by ground. Because I'm in Kansas City, I would describe my market as being run out distance from Nashville. So we actually see a lot of that crosses genres. It's not just country music, which traditionally approach things that way. There are plenty of artists that will do the weekend warrior model and base themselves in Tennessee and have maybe an 8-hour drive to get home. Fuel costs and bus costs being what they are, I still think that's a great way to service a bunch of markets from a centralized hub. But I say that living in a place that's a good-sized population center for markets that are farther from Tennessee or other entertainment industry centers, different puzzle to solve.
Yeah. So what do you think about merch splits? Are merch splits becoming an antiquated practice in the U.S.?
I don't think ancillary income is antiquated for any assembly venue. Everyone needs to find income to pay their bills, essentially, and merch, particularly for venues bigger than PACs, are a big part of the puzzle. PACs, just giving our comparative small size, we sort of follow the lead of what happens with other organizations, and until the folks playing the sheds and the arenas give up their merch splits, I don't think we'll be doing it anytime soon.
Well, thank you for joining us here on There's No Business Like. It's a pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to see you, Katie.
My stage name is Zach Mirz. I am a touring stage magician, and I am kind of known for storytelling in the magic show. So right now we're currently touring with our brand new show called Flashes of Magic. And it's just a reminder for our audiences that the greatest magic trick you could ever give to yourself is being reminded that the greatest magic trick is seeing the world through the lens of a child, full of curiosity, awe, and wonder.
Excellent.
Yeah.
I love that. At some point, I want to have a deeper conversation about that as well.
Yeah, for sure, man.
So, but today we're going to talk about the cost of touring.
Okay, I love it.
What do you think is the riskiest part of touring in the U.S. today?
You know, I've been touring for about 10 years. I started with churches, and then we started doing colleges, then we started doing corporate events, and then cruises. And then this last summer, me and my wife looked at each other saying, I want to start doing theaters. I was inspired by like older magicians that used to do it. I identified that they would kind of just go to smaller towns and secondary markets and do a show. So this last summer, we kind of put all our money into going to small towns and renting it out and doing all the promotion and you know, everything. And there was so much we learned from it, and it was incredibly risky because we weren't getting a guarantee or anything like that. It was just, hey, let's rent all these venues out for the summer and see what happens.
Wow.
Thankfully, we came out ahead, not by much, but what was the most important thing is all the experiences and what we learned from it. Just like little things like front of house, you know, people opening doors when people come into a venue, security, alcohol sales, merch sales, intermission, pre-show, all those little things that really mattered, and we integrated it throughout the summer.
Excellent. What do you wish others in the industry knew about the way, or let me repeat that, sorry. What do you wish others in the industry knew about the way you tour?
I think the thing that we learned is you don't have to wait for someone to call you and go do a show. You could just go do it. You could take all the risk, and if you believe in yourself enough in what you're doing, you don't have to take all that energy and try to convince one person to really book you. If you feel confident enough in what you're saying to other executives or bookers, you could always rent it yourself and do it. So I think that's the biggest thing that we learned is we don't need to wait around and have people call us, which is always nice, and we're so grateful and we love doing that. But you can kind of create your own journey as well. And I think that's the coolest thing and the funnest thing that we learned as well. And I was telling my wife as well, like, I could do this for the rest of my life. I love it so much. So we kind of became, you know, I've always seen myself as a magician, but I feel like my job description changed a little bit to becoming a promoter for my shows. Absolutely. And trying to fill up seats as well.
Excellent. I love that. I just love the idea of like choose your own journey. Like
yeah.
Yeah. Take that power into yourself. Do you think merch splits are becoming an antiquated practice in the U.S.?
Like with the venue?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Everybody always talks about that.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I mean,
I know it like bugs artists a lot when you know, when the venue like takes like a split or like 10% on, you know, I'm so new to the touring market. I didn't know what was normal and then I started hearing more and more people talk about like, why are you doing, you know, merch splits? Why are you taking it from the, you know, do you split your alcohol sale? You know, I never, you know, we never did a lot in merch to really bug us. I mean, I think the normal split is about 10%. Am I right in saying that?
It really depends on the market, or a lot of places I know at one point were like an 80-20 where the venue was taking 20%. Right. Sometimes it's less. It depends on the venue.
Yeah.
So.
I did hear like an article a while ago with I forget what that big kind of like touring market. They own like a lot of theaters. They did away with most of their venues of doing merch splits. For me, it doesn't bother me yet because we're not, you know, we're a family owned and operated tour, right? So like my wife and my daughter will be the best merchandise people for me, and they make, every time they're behind the counter, they make 30% more in merch sales than, you know, us hiring it out because my daughter is adorable. I think if the venue can provide the staff obviously it's justified to do a split, right? And then if it doesn't, we go to a lot more smaller towns and they're a lot more gracious and they're just like, hey, we had one show as well over the summer where they told us they were going to take a split. And at the end of the night, they loved us so much. They were like, don't worry about it. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, that is nice.
I know that's not really answering your question, but I guess, you gotta think like, is it worth the fight, or is it worth the battle?
Yeah, no, I think you are touching on something, because this is sort of where I fall on this, is like, as a presenter, as a venue, if I'm providing the seller, I feel that, yes, we should take a split on that if I'm providing the staff on that. But if the artist is providing that, I don't feel it's necessary. But I also think that the merch split is a good negotiation opportunity there as well.
Yeah, and some people I know from just the whispers, like, that's a hill some people are worth dying for. And for me, it's, do you want to lose the venue and the quality and the experience for your audiences to go somewhere else that doesn't take those small percentages? Or would you rather have the venue that you want, spend a little bit more money, but have your fans experience something amazing if that's the venue you want?
Excellent.
So for me, that's, I guess that would be, the final decision for like a booker or an agent, and how much it bothers someone as well.
Excellent.
So.
All right. Well, Zach, thank you for your time.
Yeah, man. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
McAndrew, Femme Whiting Auditorium. I'm the Director of Programming.
Excellent. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So let's talk a little about cost of touring. As a presenter, you have some insight here. So what do you think is the riskiest part of touring in the U.S. today?
Not understanding why things cost what they cost. I've learned about that a lot in this conference this time around, how people are budgeting, and it opened my eyes to how other people budget, and that's why I need to take into consideration how much everything else costs. So that's been really interesting to learn this time around.
What do you wish others in the industry knew about the way your presenting financials have changed since the pandemic?
They haven't. They haven't changed. My presenting financials have largely stayed the same, and everything else keeps going up. So it's presenting an interesting challenge and an interesting puzzle to kind of fit in the pieces to still bring really great art to our community, but also stay within our financial limitations.
What do you think is the most cost-effective way of touring in the U.S.?
I'm going to go with transparency on it and figuring out how you can partner and work together on it. Who's got the hotel deal of a lifetime? Who can figure out the best way to feed an artist? Communicating whatever you can to make sure that the realities of touring and the realities of presenting are at the forefront of the conversation.
Do you think merch splits are becoming an antiquated practice in the U.S.? How do you feel about merch splits?
Oh, tricky question. I was just talking about merch earlier today and a split on that. I don't think it's antiquated. I think that there is a lot to be said for a merch split when it's worthwhile. Meaning the merch has done an incredible amount of sales, and maybe we've provided the help, maybe we haven't to sell. There is room for that split there, but I think when they're selling a couple $100s, it's not really worth it to take that from the artist too. Mm-hmm. So it's a double-edged sword if you ask me.
Kind of what are the...
If we hit this number of sales, then we're going to split here, just like a back end that we do on our deals for the show.
I love that idea. All right. Well, thanks for sitting down with me.
Thanks for having me.
So great to see you here at Max.
Good to see you too.
Hey, this is Pat Hazell, a veteran of the There's No Business Like podcast.
Thanks for joining us again, Pat. Let's jump right in. We're going to talk about cost of touring today. What do you think is the riskiest part of touring today in the U.S.?
Well, I will say regarding cost of touring, first of all, it's great to be domestic. If you're coming from another country or there's where those costs are really getting insurmountable. But even now, between airfare and shipping of set pieces and taking a production manager and rental cars, all of it goes up and the fee stays the same. So that means your margin is really quite different, right, in terms of what you take home. So it is tricky. I feel like you don't want to charge the presenter more, but you also don't want to lose a lot of money. If you're getting to a place where 50% of the cost goes to getting you there, it's kind of awkward. You know what I mean? So I would say that's a challenge that the rental car company, the airline, they make no apology for the fact that they're jacking the prices up.
What is something that you wish others in the industry knew about the way that you tour, or the way that the presenting financials have changed within the last 4 years?
Well, I would say that the pandemic has changed the partnership in a way, which is that I think it's smart for artists and agents to be considerate of the risk that gets taken. And so sometimes that means discussing splits or percentages or things where the guarantee might be a little bit lower, but the reward might be higher if an artist brings in a good following on their social media or something else. They should be rewarded for it, but also if they are able to take some of the risk off of the presenter's plate going in. And that's communication, right? That's do you establish a relationship where you can do that together? Because the talent has to rely on the local person to market it and present it in a way that the audience will hear about it. So I think there's an open-mindedness that's required. And also, we don't want to take for granted that we don't want to not work.
Yeah.
So when things fell away, when it came back, it didn't come back in the same routed way. Like it wasn't efficient to return at all these slapdash places at different times that used to be tightly routed.
Yeah.
I think we're kind of getting on the other side of where things have come back somewhat and the audience is behaving differently, and we're not dealing with social distance seating, and that was all a tremendous challenge.
Yeah, not just challenging, but it was a grind of a way to do business.
Yeah, not to mention that the consumer was being bombarded with binge watching, and it's kind of intravenous entertainment feeding when you can watch its whole season of things in a week, right?
Yeah.
So it changes how they behave when they want to be entertained. And I think nobody, after coming back, they missed the live contagious nature of laughing together, crying together, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, the reward is there's nothing that replaces it.
Yeah.
But if you go to a movie theater, it's empty.
What do you think is the most cost-effective way of touring in the U.S. today?
Both blocking and routing, which people mistake what those two things are. But routing is an efficiency thing that the tour manager, the agent, the artist can do. And block booking, it requires an investment of time on the presenters to begin to find out who is near us, who does the same kind of thing, who are we willing to partner with that maybe doesn't have as many seats, but they can do Thursday or Sunday, and we can pay a little bit more on Friday and Saturday. All of that is about trust, relationship, communication, networking. And I think a lot of people think it's going to magically happen, and it really requires time and energy. Yeah. And finding out, even if you, I know, are in the middle of a state.
Yep.
There might be people across the state line that are perfect for you that they wouldn't think of, just the same way as when we want to fly into Kentucky, we end up landing in Cincinnati, Ohio, or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Probably you fly into Louisville to get to Ohio. But the point is that it doesn't make sense until you start to look at it.
Yeah.
And I feel like we could all educate ourselves more about that.
Yeah. Do you think that merch splits are becoming an antiquated practice in the U.S.?
I feel like it used to be, at least my sense of it, was a rock band would make so much money on it that the presenter wanted a piece of the action, right? Yeah. And then I will say, I don't have that much merch, but when the percentage number got so high going to the presenter, I didn't want to blow the deal on the overall show and all of that. So I just say, no merch on this leg of the tour, because it wasn't worth me boxing up or putting things. And also there was a lot of what I would call hard materials.
Yeah.
Nobody's taking a CD or an album or something if they can download it or they can do that. So that's kind of there kind of doesn't need to be anybody out in the front of the lobby selling anything, right? Yeah. And even T-shirts and things like that. There isn't, if you have a bus and truck, you have it. But if you're a guy with two suitcases, one of them's not merch anymore.
Yeah.
I feel like the nice thing about it is that for the customer that's an audience member, they want to take home a piece of the artist. They want to have a souvenir. They want to remember the show. They want to give money towards a singer-songwriter, so they buy their CD. In many ways, I feel like the lion's share of it should still go to the artist. Now, this comes from an artist perspective, but the fact is sometimes that makes the difference if a singer-songwriter can put you on their leg of the tour.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, if they make $700 more, that's a big deal to them.
Yeah.
And hopefully you have a venue or seat numbers where your ticket price is created enough that you can do it. So, I mean, I don't know if the product and stuff is so much antiquated as the idea that it's become pretty loose of what people expect.
Yeah.
So I think the numbers, I don't know if there's a way for people to come to an agreement what a standard would be.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny looking at a contract though and looking at that line and either party saying what?
Well, thanks for sitting down and talking to us a little bit today.
I think what you guys are doing is great for presenters, artists, agents, and it's kind of a unique perspective in the industry. Yeah. So I salute you on all these episodes.
Thank you, Pat.
All right, cheers.
I thought this is some great conversations about the cost of touring and just the different approaches that folks take in the industry. But what I really think is the hot button topic that, we've been talking about a lot here and a lot of time just behind the scenes is the merch split. So I would love to know, what are your thoughts on the merch split?
I do a lot more commercial booking than the rest of you. And in turn, I deal with artists who are expecting a merch split all the time. I mean, the stories that I get from them are that merch splits have continued to go up to 25, 35%.
That's wild.
That is crazy.
Take up to 40% in one occasion. That's just a completely inequitable practice, in my opinion. There are other people that feel differently. One, I feel like it's inequitable because I don't take a part of their merch because they don't get a part of my alcohol sales. And the same balance could be used for the argument on either side of that is, they're not here to see the artist without the building, but they're not here in the building without the artist. And so making it an equitable practice is that, hey, we take our concession, we take our bar sales, they take their merch, I stay hands off with it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, Josh. It's the hands-off approach. I understand a small percentage of the merch split if the venue is providing the seller or needs to provide a seller. Not necessarily that they, are requiring that, but if a band can't sell their own merch or an artist can't sell their own merch, the merch split then makes sense because you're staffing that. Katie sent out a great article that we can tag in the show notes from Pitchfork that talks about the merch split. And, I was really surprised because most people I talk to in our industry, are in the 10 to 20% range. But it seems that a lot of venues are pushing that to 30 and 40%. And which, like Pat mentioned in his, you just don't sell merch on that leg of the tour because you can't afford it. And what I thought was most interesting about that I had never considered were the bands who are openers for, a larger act. And that larger act has negotiated the contract and negotiated all those things, but the opener hasn't been considered in that. So they walk into a venue and when they have to sell, they're beholden to that merch split, which I thought was really interesting and something I never considered.
Yeah, I think when we're talking about small independent artists, like I don't remember if it was Pat, one of the interviews talked about how that is a big difference for them. That little bit of money that they might sell, it's how they make it to the next venue. It's the cost for the gas and the food and whatever else they have. Whereas it's not really that much of a big deal for the venue. And then on the other side of the coin, though, and we've talked about this before, is like when you have like the Lion King tour in, and they literally require an entire retail store being set up in your lobby with a minimum of 3 staff people and a security guard, all even when the building is closed. It's like, yeah, that makes sense to have a split then. Mm-hmm. But yeah, for these independent artists and stuff, I think it is inequitable, as you guys have been saying.
Like on soft goods, your cost is 40%. And if then the venue's taking 40%, then you're only left with 20% of it for yourself. And right. And some of the time you're closer to 50%. And so it's taking out all of the profit from you. And so what's the point of selling in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and I think with those very tight margins, when artists have to raise the price of their merchandise, that actually makes the experience worse for our patrons. I don't know how many times I've gone to a merch table and looked and gone, I'm not paying $60 for a t-shirt. I already paid X amount of dollars for a ticket. I can't afford or don't want to pay, $60 for a t-shirt. And they are raising the price so they can make that gas money, right? Or they can fund the next leg of the tour. We had a dino show in once that we're selling these dino masks. I mean, the only value out of that dino mask that I got is I have a very cute picture of my child with the mask on, Swiffer mopping my floors. It's adorable. That dino mask is $25. What parent, after paying for, 3, 4, 5 tickets, can afford $25 dino masks for all of the kids that they brought with them? So if we're not taking a cut, which amounts to not that much for the venue, they cannot have to charge $25. They can charge $18 for that dino mask, still make the same margin, and make the experience great and more affordable for our patrons as well.
I also think that there are costs associated with merch that venues don't always see. There's obvious that they have to pay to create it, but every time that it flies, unless they're checking it, that they're $40 at least in on, they've already paid to get it to your venue. So they need to make $40 to break even. There's also, like you just said, Katie, like you have to take credit card. And unless the venue is also providing the Square reader and the cell phone, they also have to pay that monthly and Square takes
per transaction fee
per transaction from it. And so what I liked about this conversation is that I think from the pandemic we've learned a lot more about the finances of each other side of the business. And I think it's like those kind of costs too that get hidden that people don't talk a ton about because they're maybe not enormous costs, but based on this conversation, if your tour is flying, I mean, like that's a huge risk, right?
And so the cost of touring also included other topics. And one of the things that Helen talked about was how difficult it's becoming on the agent side or the booking side, because their cost for touring is going up. Everything's more expensive these days for them. But obviously, it's also been a rough time for presenters. So, offers and things have been lower, not even flat all across the board. And so they're seeing rising costs and less income, which, of course, if they're in a position where they're making money off of a percentage of the artist fee being booked by the artist, then their commissions are going down and everything else. So it is becoming a harder business to be in if you're not, representing some big commercial act that's, getting a lot of the bigger offers still.
That's an interesting point, Brian. I was thinking about that listening to these, is that, we're obviously talking about the cost of touring and how, the artist side of things are up, but I mean, the venue side of things are up as well. I mean, right. in some different areas. And the hard part is like how,
and audiences are down and a lot of unearned income is going away. Yeah. Everyone's getting squeezed on all sides.
How do we balance that out when a lot of venues are sort of trying to take into account, like, we don't want to raise our ticket prices because that'll affect our audiences. But at the same time, like, artists should be compensated more because their costs of touring are going up. Venue needs more money. I mean, it's a challenging, puzzle to put together, but I will say that there are some venues and plenty of venues that are doing a really great job at that.
And I think it goes further than just cost of touring going up. Their cost of living has gone up tremendously.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so many of them are just trying to do more dates rather than raising their cost, because they're trying to be courteous to the presenters and that part of the industry when their fees really should be rising. I mean, they should come up with the cost of living as opposed to making themselves struggle further to accommodate the presenters who aren't willing to accept the reality that the cost of everything is going up and your ticket prices have to as well. I mean, it's just a reality in this world.
It is. And I think the other piece of this is that coming out of the pandemic, we saw a call for equity in wages as well. And that there's not only talking about paying artists more, but also paying our own employees more as well. Like, actually, somebody said to me last week at Max that we have subsidized the nonprofit sector with our own labor as employees. Like, we have settled for salaries that are far too low for far too many hours for far too long. And that's how nonprofits have been built over the course of this experiment in the United States. And so we're sort of came to this like moment where we're saying we need to deal with inflation, rising costs, healthcare costs, all these things. We need to make more money as individuals and employees of these institutions, going against all these other factors that you guys are just talking about. TRG Arts released a study showing that Private sector giving, though, dropped in 2023. So all the government funding that came through in 2020, 2021 into 22, that has gone away. Private sector giving has gone down. Earned income, which includes sponsorships, ticket sales, fundraising events, investment and endowment income, sponsorships have gone down, and ticket sales are still like sort of middling to sort of returning. So all of these other areas of income have come down, but yet costs and the demands of employees, rightly so, to like earn a living wage have gone up. So like, what is a venue supposed to do when, you know, all of the traditional ways that they've made money to pay people have also disappeared or are fledgling, you know, against all these other factors? Like, it's a catch-22. What do you do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a challenging thing to address. I mean, because I think the reality is that, you know, in order for some of this to continue, costs do have to increase, ticket prices have to go up. I mean, which will outprice many audiences in the market, and the arts become something that is just for the upper class, which creates a whole accessibility issue. Unfortunately, not even just in this country anymore. I mean, in many countries, like the support from governments to the arts sector are decreasing and going down. And so for us, I mean, you know, in this country, like we've created this nonprofit culture, which is, you know, upholding these ideals, not just in the arts and culture sector, but in a lot of sectors. And that is, you know, requires individuals to support that and make it accessible to those who maybe can't afford that. And at some point, that pendulum's got to shift, and we've got to figure out what that looks like. And it's sort of a scary moment, I think, in the industry and in a lot of things, like, because, you know, look, we could sit here and talk for hours about all the problems that we have in the industry. However, I am always the perpetual optimist, and I think that there will find a balance, and that venues are finding a balance. And thankfully, we do have a lot of really great people in our communities that can, you know, help bridge that gap.
I really appreciate that the accountant is the perpetual optimist.
So just like we talked about last week, these are just a few voices in our industry, and some of these topics are pretty heated sometimes. So we do encourage you to go and share your thoughts and ideas on our socials, and we'd love to keep the conversation going. We know because it can be so heated, sometimes we just ask that you be respectful of differing opinions. And we know that we're all coming, hopefully what you did here today is that we're all coming from places of challenge, and we're all trying to find a way to do what's right for everybody as an ecosystem, because we want to lift everybody, and everybody, the artists deserve more, the venues want to do more, but are having issues. So just, if you guys have anything to share, please do on our socials. And so that's it for this week, but we hope you join us next week when we bring another interview, and then we'll bring some more topical things that we got from Max down the road. But until then, we'll talk to you soon.
All right, everyone. Thanks for listening to There's No Business Like. Our producers and hosts are Brian Zelmer, Josh Benson, Kevin Maynard, Katie Miller, and me, Danielle Van Hook. Views expressed in this podcast are ours alone and are not reflective of the organizations we are a part of. Keep up with us at nobusinesslike.com. There you'll find links to all of our episodes and socials. If you like this podcast, give us a like, a follow, a review, or our favorite, a 5-star rating. Oh wait, what was that site? I got it, don't worry. It is nobusinesslike.com. Do I sound out bus-I-ness every time I type it? Yep, sure do. Stay in touch, my friends.
Hey, Brian, when you do this intro, can you do it as if you were Brybaka?
I'm not good at voices.
That seemed great.
That was
funny.
great.
Thank you.
Oh my God, that was so good.
Do you know how many people made that sound to us?
I had to write a check because they wouldn't take credit cards, and who carries cash these days?
And who carries checks
carries a
these
check?
days?
I know.
Yeah.
I do.
Luckily, you were in the audience, Katie, because you're the
Yeah.
only one I think that carries the checks these days.